Welcome once again to Speaking of Strong Style, where we cover all things New Japan Pro Wrestling, from results to news and issues surrounding Japan's #1 wrestling company, and even more. In fact, we're going to be talking about several different wrestling companies in this show. It all weaves together. I am Stephen Conway, along with, as always, Jeremy Finestone. Jeremy and I are contributors for FightGameMedia.com, and we are here to talk about all of these things with New Japan Pro Wrestling. You saw some there in the slate at the very beginning. You saw Kushida on there. That photograph, by the way, comes from TOKIMN, TOKIMN_ON on Twitter. If you like the photograph there, and they've got a lot of great photos on there. If you want to follow with great photographic coverage of New Japan Pro Wrestling, that's a terrific Twitter handle to follow. Jeremy, I thought we were going to have a nice, easy show this week. Hello. I thought it was going to be nice. We'll talk a little about that trio of Korakuen Hall shows. We talk a little NJPW Strong, maybe kick around a little G1 Forbidden Door. We're back on the streets. Instead, there was a press conference that was held, and it was primarily held by Katami Obari, the president of New Japan, and also Takaki Kidani. Boy, that's a mouthful for me today, I guess. The president of Bushiroad, which is the parent company that owns New Japan, Stardom, and it's a big entertainment toy conglomerate that owns it. And they said a lot of very interesting things. Now, we're going to get into those things here in just a little bit. But after what seemed like it was going to be a quiet week, we suddenly have a lot to talk about. And I'll tell you what, Jeremy, most of this stuff kind of excited me. I'm a little more fired up about New Japan than I was at the beginning of the week after hearing some of these things. And like I said, we'll get into them in more detail in just a bit. But what were your thoughts as you kind of looked through the notes on this press conference?
Okay, so hi. This is so funny. I saw the press conference notes and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. They got a press conference going into the G1 after all these New Japan Road. Probably just going to be a couple of things here or there. Just, dotting the T's, crossing the dotting the I's, crossing the T's, that whole deal. Before you go into the G1. Oh no, we're getting way more. This is the giant brick breaking news dropping in the middle of everything going on with wrestling. And I know that a couple people have mentioned it here and there on the internet, but I don't really feel like it had the impact that, say, WWE or AEW, if they were to make these kind of announcements, the reaction would be nearly the same.
Yeah, I think people are underrating just what was said today, and we're going to get into that. And let's start with there were three primary points. There are a lot of things, but three primary points that we wanted to really get into. First of all, Stardom and New Japan are both owned by Bushiroad, this conglomerate I've mentioned, and it's been good for both for the most part. Stardom, for instance, even during a pandemic, has seen its audience increase. And Bushiroad's been good for Stardom overall. And New Japan has been trucking along. Attendance has been difficult. They have the restrictions on the fans and things. But these two companies, Stardom and New Japan, are starting to be integrated a little more. And apparently there's going to be more of that going forward. We've talked on previous episodes. There's going to be a dual branded show for the first time, New Japan and Stardom. And before this, Stardom had guest spots, to put it in a layman's terms there, on Wrestle Kingdom, where just a Stardom match would be part of the pre-show or early in the show at Wrestle Kingdom, as if they were just guests brought in for a day. There wasn't any real continuity or stories brought into it, just had a really good match. So the fans there were treated to a good match at the Dome. Well, now we're getting an integrated show that's dual branded. And they mentioned that there is going to be more of this, that there's going to be more of New Japan and Stardom working together on shows. They even mentioned mixed tag team matches at this upcoming event. Jeremy, this could be a very big deal. Of course, the difference between North American wrestling culture and Japanese wrestling culture is that in North America, obviously, there are women's divisions within these companies. In Japan, I've had this discussion with people who don't understand, why doesn't New Japan have a women's division? Well, they're actually kind of ahead of us on this, because women have their own promotions, which isn't something that's really seen a whole lot here. Shimmer tried, and they're still, there's some.
They're doing their thing, but.
Yeah, but What are your thoughts on this as far as further integrating? I'm kind of excited at the idea of seeing Stardom wrestlers on New Japan shows and vice versa, perhaps going forward.
There's a lot of big picture stuff that you can think about on this. You have this show that's coming up in November, and I think the magic number was 2 mixed tag matches where you have Stardom and New Japan wrestlers in the same tag match. The men wrestle the men, the women wrestle the women. The other interesting thing on the Stardom announcement is that they are going to be bringing talent to New Japan Strong, which is going to completely change the landscape of the women's wrestling in the United States. It's going to make the rest of the women who are already here better by competing and having opportunities to compete with Stardom talent in the States, because getting over to Japan is not is still a bit prohibitive. I know Willow Nightingale for another Tokyo Joshi Pro couldn't get her visas in time, so having that opportunity to do so is going to be really big. And then you take into account the promotions that are here stateside that would have interest in a more attention brought to Stardom because it's more talent that they would potentially want to see on their own promotions. And is it better for Stardom to have their talent cooperate, or is it better to have them here and see a promotion like WWE go after them and them see if they can keep producing that kind of talent in perpetuity? There's a lot to this that is it's a big deal, and we haven't quite scratched the surface on a lot of it.
And he mentioned a little bit, this was Kidani, the Bushiroad president, that there is a culture in North America, and people ask questions when you don't have women on the shows. And at the same time, in Japan, there has been decades long, like 70 years, going back to the 50s, of there being women's promotions, which I think is kind of at a higher level than just being part of an overall company. So Stardom certainly is the best, I think, in my opinion, the best women's group out there. And I would hate to see it get folded into New Japan completely, just because I think it would be a step back for Stardom to go from its own full-time touring promotion to having 2 or 3 matches on a New Japan show. I think that would be a step backwards for women's wrestling in Japan. There are other companies. There's Ice Ribbon, there's Tokyo Joshi Pro, and there's a lot of good wrestling in Japan, women's wrestling in addition to men's. I just feel like the biggest one is Stardom. The most famous one is Stardom at the moment. Yeah. And for it to just be folded in. Now, in North America, I think it makes perfect sense. But
yes, for the reasons that's the part where I would go with.
Yeah. So I think Bushiroad is smart enough to realize that it's better to have 2 full-time touring companies than just one. But in North America, it makes an awful lot of sense to have, they get international experience. They get to be in different environments. They get to come over and work with different people. And I just was thinking too, with it, even further along, the AEW connection as well. Perhaps some of these Americans would have an easier road to come in and work some of these tournaments, similar to what we just saw with Clark Connors, Ace Austin, Alex Zane, and the best of the Super Juniors. And there are women in AEW and other companies, not just AEW, but Anna Jay, Chris Statlander, that could really use that kind of experience. Who cares if they go over to a tournament and win 1 match, or if they do a tour and lose most of the nights? It's the experience that would count. And it would also protect some of the Stardom women from having to do jobs. There's a lot of ways that people can win at this, that all companies can win at this. And then in Japan, keep them separate and keep that culture of women's wrestling as its own thing, with its own shows and its own tournaments and things. I think everyone can win here if it's done carefully.
Definitely a sense of it's not broke, so don't fix it over in Japan. But with the, let's be honest, frankly, breakneck speed in which they're announcing New Japan Strong shows. They got one in North Carolina. I think they just announced another one for LA in August. So I think there's 3 upcoming within the next 6 weeks, and they're doing that programming. There's a lot of good talent on New Japan Strong. But at the same time, if they can't have G1 level talent because they're all at the G1, there's going to be a void to fill in terms of what talent that they can have to create sustained, interesting cards. The West, they got the tag tournament that we're going to talk about later on. But even the last episode of New Japan Strong was almost exclusively New Japan proper talent versus actual strong talent. So they're not going to have that luxury in a couple of weeks. So having a set of plans, including Stardom talent, that just gives them more just amazing talent to work with, talent that can get better. I don't know Stardom as well as the people I respect that speak lovingly of it, but I want to. And this is the perfect opportunity for a guy like me who watches New Japan, who watches all this American domestic television and has braced himself into the New Japan culture to then go even further. This is a doorway. This is like a gateway opportunity for a lot of people, and they're being really smart about it.
There's a belief within Japan, and it looks like their market research has shown that there is not as much crossover audience as you would think between Joshi, the women's version of the product, and tradition. What I guess we would call traditional. The women's wrestling is traditional there too, so that's the wrong word. But the men's version of the product. So New Japan, All Japan, Noah versus what used to be All Japan Women was a major company before their owners got into financial trouble in other businesses and had to shut down. Right. There have been a lot of very, very successful women's companies. And right now Stardom is on the top of that with Tokyo Joshi Pro and Ice Ribbon and others. I know there are others. I'm blanking on any further than those three right now, but that there isn't a huge crossover. There are hardcores, that people like us that watch everything over there in Japan. And then there's the audience that I don't want to say casual. They're New Japan fans, or there are Stardom fans. The idea of starting to get a little bit of cross promotion and maybe show them New Japan folks some Stardom matches and say, hey, there's a streaming service here and they're having a big show next time and you should check it out. Here's a match on a big New Japan show to take a look at, or a mixed tag. And then for Stardom, I would like someday for the major Stardom shows, which sometimes they run Budokan Hall or Tokyo Oda, maybe a junior heavyweight match. I think something like Hiromu and Bushi against Phantasmo and Ishimori would fit right in as kind of a special feature on a big Stardom show. And it would say, it's to some of the people that are only Stardom fans, this New Japan stuff's kind of fun and it moves along at a pretty crisp pace. Maybe we should check that out. And the same thing with the Stardom people appearing on big New Japan shows. Oh, well, okay, then they have a thing going, and then maybe you get a little bit of a boost from each fan base that way. And then you can do the thing in North America, where you have men and women on the card all the time. It just seems like something that could really turn out nice and be good experience for so many people.
So, they've tested the waters in the past with a Stardom New Japan arrangement in the Wrestle Kingdom, like you mentioned. How much of this, when I ask you this, do you think was spurred on by New Japan's reaction to how Forbidden Door went?
I'm sure it didn't hurt, and I'm sure that it's something that they have been thinking of probably for a long time. I mean, the joint promoted show was announced before Forbidden Door was a success or a failure, when no one really knew yet. So I think this is something that they've had in the works for a little bit, but I'm sure that when they saw Forbidden Door and they saw that, Tony Storm and Thunder Rosa had a match on that show that fit right in. It I know a lot of people voted it the worst match on the show, but my God, that show was at a level that very, very few have ever been before. It's one of the best pay-per-view shows I've ever watched as far as just match quality and fun. So for that match to just fit right in, they'd be silly not to go back and just think, are we missing something here? Should we be doing something like this at the Dome? Maybe instead of just at a pre-show match or a prelim match, maybe we start working some Stardom stuff in. They're going to have to build the story. Right now, there hasn't been any continuity. It's just been a guest match at Tokyo Dome. So there's some work to be done where they would have to educate the New Japan audience on why this match that they're seeing matters. But I think after that, I think they'd be silly not to at least take a look at it.
Okay, so who should I be looking out for in the next 6 months if, say, there's going to be a Stardom top title match at that November thing. And are there 4 names that you would put out there in the 2, 3, 4 names that you would just say these are the names that are at the top of the top of the promotion, and these are the names that when you think of Tanahashi and Okada in New Japan, these are the comps, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the smart thing to do would maybe start with the people that have appeared at Wrestle Kingdom before.
Okay.
And they have brought some big time people to Kingdom. I mean, Starlight Kid is really good. So's Iwatani. So there's a couple there, but perhaps this is someone you have seen before. This is, and perhaps build toward that. And there's certainly all kinds of talent there, but it becomes a thing, and we've seen it so many times where American companies have made this mistake. If you bring in 10 at once, none of it means anything.
100%.
And so if perhaps you start with, hey, remember this great match at Wrestle Kingdom this past year? Well, this person is now the champion and they're going to make a big title defense. And that match was fantastic. This title defense should be really exciting and you should check it out. That's a way to kind of integrate it. Maybe start with some of the people that have been on Kingdom before, and then maybe the tag team partners or the challenger is someone new, so that you just slowly bring in some new names. And that way they mean a little bit rather than, hey, here's just a bunch of women that you've never heard of before. Hope you like it. And that's just not going to have the same pop as if you build it with names and grow that familiarity.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they roll out that talent over the next few months, because if you remember how they did it with New Japan, they slowly brought out people. The first person that you ever saw was Kenta right. way back, and then you had a Jay White tease a few months like back in January of this year, and then you slowly had people rolling out in matches here, there, everywhere. But the last person that you saw before all hell broke loose at Forbidden Door was Okada. It was the big gun. They waited until the very end to tell you that, last but not least, the most important people here are there. So you may not see the Starlight Kid ahead of time, but if you're looking for like who are the big names, like I'm interested in the main event scene and kind of thing, like these are things that we're going to be dipping our toe in. I know very little about Stardom. And, the goal for me over the next 6 months is to be able to talk about it in such a way that, after a press conference today where it's like, oh, it seems like Stardom is going to be a pretty important topic in the whole scheme of New Japan, time to get read up on it,
Well, this is a good time to mention, by the way, for the folks that are watching this, as part of Fight Game Network on the Patreon, and normally we do this a little later in the show. I'm going to mention it now because there is a show that is devoted to the women's wrestling scene in Japan, which is going to become a bigger part of the wrestling scene in both New Japan and in North America, just like we said. It's called the 5-Star Joshi Podcast. And it's something that our friend Scott runs. That's
Scott Edwards.
Scott Edwards. He is terrific at this. The man knows the Joshi scene back to front, up and down, and that's part of the Fight Game Network there. Sometimes there are clips that filter onto this YouTube channel that you're watching now, so look out for those. As that card approaches, look out for the 5-Star Joshi Show. Every once in a while, they tease you with an episode there for free, and then but it's on the Patreon, which is only $5 a month and gets you a lot more, which we'll talk about later. But I wanted to put in a little plug for that because you're absolutely right. It's a terrific promotion, and it's definitely worth people's attention. I want to give it more as well. I've liked everything I've seen from it, and I'm looking forward to that integration, as long as they keep that culture. It's one of the best things about Japanese wrestling is it has that culture of women headlining on their own and not being a co-main event. I mean, they are the main event, the prelims, the mid-card. They are the show, and
they own their show, man.
Yeah, and it's great stuff.
So. I mean, the way I look at it from the outside looking in is if you had an entire roster of main event WWE women. That's how I think of Stardom. And if I were to go and watch a show, my expectation would be women who are at the level, if not surpassed, the main event roster women.
It's definitely a very fast-paced product too. Their matches are full speed ahead, and their cardio is ridiculous. I don't know how they maintain the pace they maintain for as long as they do. And every time I see that, I think that it's like, are these people ever going to get tired? They never do. And it's impressive, and it has a New Japan junior heavyweight feel sometimes, where it's this really fast paced action, a lot of dives, a lot of things, but there is still psychology. There's still really good character work. It's fun to watch when you see it.
Oh, to be young and fit. You know who else are young and fit? Are the Young Lions. And that Young Lion program
look at
changing,
that,
isn't it?
Goodness. My goodness, I'm in awe of that. That was beautiful.
Thank you. So the Young Lion program was the next thing on the list to be discussed on this whole press conference. They are going to completely redesign and redo how they do their Young Lion program. And I am still trying to take it in as to exactly what they mean, but they are looking at what they're doing and getting the wrestlers ready for main level shows and seeing what they can do to get them where they are. Part of that issue is that they are realizing that New Japan has more wrestlers over the age of 30 than they ever had before, and they're looking for a different entry process for talent. They're looking at perhaps college. They're looking at offering second careers within the company after people are done. They're trying to find a way to make talent stay with them earlier and be with them longer. And I'd like to thank the Reddit user Effing Kenta for a fantastic write-up who got this up immediately after this press conference went out and was able to, inform a lot of people about what was going on with this. Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I love the Young Lion program, but I also understand why they feel the need to change. It is an older roster. And one thing about the Young Lion program that is a drawback, now it creates great wrestlers. What it does is take a really long time. And at its current structure, and the pandemic has affected everything in the world, of course, but even before, wrestlers would be in the black trunks, black boots, no music, just the generic Young Lion music for a very long time. And there are times when I thought that, okay, I think these guys are ready to go on. And then you go on excursion. Let's go through this. So you start with the shaved head at the beginning, then you can grow your hair out a little bit. But
basic
black
training.
outfits, very generic. Yes, very generic. And then after what has been a very long time, they then would go off on excursion. That would mean Rev Pro in England. It could mean CMLL. It could mean in the past Ring of Honor. That's where Sho and Yo went, for instance. Great Okan was over in England, and Shota Umino went to England. CMLL is where a lot of people. Wato went there, but Hiromu Takahashi was there, and so was Desperado back in his Namahage days.
A good example right now is Takeshita is on a 1-year excursion from his main promotion now.
From DDT, yeah.
And so if you're looking for a frame of reference, that's essentially what it is. They go away to another promotion and they get better outside of their comfort zone.
Then after a while, they come back with a new gimmick. So Master Wato went from just Hiroi Kawato in all black to this character. And we saw, the most successful is, good grief, Takahashi coming back as the Time Bomb and now is the biggest star in the division. It takes a long time is the thing, and probably too long. He mentioned that having them in the black boots and trunks would probably be more abbreviated going forward. Maybe fast track that a little bit, that once they realize that, hey, these guys are pretty good and they do have talent, rather than having them go through 6 more months of doing jobs on these shows, maybe then go ahead and release them, send them on excursion. Now you have New Japan Strong. They can go to Los Angeles. There's possibilities still with Ring of Honor and AEW now that we're working together. Rev Pro still working with CMLL. New Japan works with so many different promotions right now. There's a lot of places where these guys could go and then bring them back, hopefully a little bit sooner. Also, you mentioned lowering the barriers for entry. There are so few people that ever get in to the dojo. So they were talking about doing things like people that want to begin to train in high school, having programs for college people, just finding new ways to get younger talent in. It's an admirable trait that New Japan likes to keep people on that were legends. Kojima can still go, actually. So can Nagata. Obviously, Suzuki can. Those are 3 guys over 50 that can still wrestle really well. There's the other side of that, which is Tenzan, Honma, guys that are maybe not having terrific matches anymore, but are good mentors for the young lions. It's an admirable thing that they don't just kick these people off to the curb when they decide, oh, they're too old to be main eventers anymore. It's an admirable trait, but it also can make the roster a little top heavy. There are people like Goto, Ishii, who are in their 40s, not going to be there 5-7 years the same way they are now, probably. So building for the future and maybe getting that fast tracked a little bit is smart to me.
It's really funny because you're sitting there and you're thinking about the G1, right? And we have 28 people in this field, but the youth on it isn't exactly there. We still have a veteran roster. Jay White might be the youngest guy in New Japan proper, maybe David Finlay, in terms of like just being just over the age of 30. And when you look at like Tanahashi is fantastic, and I am not ever going to throw shade at Tanahashi, but there is going to be a point where people who have been around as long as Tanahashi are not going to be able to go at the level that the G1 is demanding of them. And they are going to be at a crossroads within the next 4 to 5 years to make sure that their talent can fill 28 rosters. Are they going to keep 28 people in the G1 from here on out? Are they going to add more to it? I mean, you could theoretically go 8 brackets of 6 people and just go hog wild in like 5 years if the demand is there with AEW. You know what I mean? Like if I don't ever think they're going to do that, but that's the kind of mentality. Like you should have a field of people that like theoretically, like I got backups upon backups upon backups, because the G1 is a difficult proposition even at like your prime. So I have to commend them for looking at the future, because we're looking at rosters all across the world in which the stars are getting older and they're not creating new stars. No. And the criticisms are there for the people that are leaning on the people they always lean on, and people are noticing when you're not creating the new stars, and you have to invest in it. Is Master Wato ever going to be a world champion? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But are you going to give him the opportunity to reach for that kind of opportunity? Or are you going to stick with, God bless them, the Ishiis, the Kanadas, the Evils, the people that have been in the G1 or have been on the roster close for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in a prominent position? And does that keep the product fresh? So I think they're looking at like, how do you get new excitement if we just have the same talent still on top?
Yeah, I love the Young Lion program. It's done so well for the company. It makes so much sense. It's that focused training on not 200 guys, but on a half a dozen of them at various stages in that gym. And then they're brought along carefully and they're brought along correctly. It's just that sometimes I think that they get bogged down in it, and it's as well, this person is clearly ready. And right now, the ones they have, Oiwa, Fujita, Nakashima, they're very good. They're not ready to go on an excursion yet. But to give examples of some of the more recent ones, like Uemura, I thought he was almost as good as some of the other juniors as he was wearing those black trunks and black boots. And I just thought, does he need to be taking losses for 5 more months the way they did? I thought his excursion could have started, 6 months earlier, and get moving on this so that when we do bring him back, and it should be a break between, but does it have to be like a 3-year break? I mean, how long has it been since Shota Umino went on excursion?
I think it's been 3 years. Because
does it need to be that long? Because now, by the time you do that, these guys are in their mid to late 20s. If you make this entire process 6 years long, you get them at 21. You get them, mostly they get them younger than that. But if you start speeding that along a little bit, I think it would be healthy and get these guys in maybe in their early to mid 20s instead of mid to late, and that I think would probably be of a benefit.
So Carl Fredericks just graduated the Young Lions program, and he has expressed his frustration about his lack of momentum, direction, whatnot with the promotion. Do you think that this decision either legitimizes what he's already been saying, or do you feel differently about that?
I feel a little bit. I feel like something's missing with Carl Fredericks,
Right.
and
We've gone over that before.
Yeah. And so to hear him say, "Well, I'm frustrated with my progress," I think New Japan probably is too.
Okay.
Right. I just feel like something it clearly been surpassed by Clark Connors, and I think even, and in some ways even Uemura, I think is sometimes gets, and Coughlin. Yeah, and so but separate the message from the messenger. It's not the worst point in the world. I think when it comes to Fredericks, I don't know if he really is on that level yet. You see him more on Strong than I do.
Well, he disappeared. He has vanished a little bit, and we'll cover that a little bit later. But it really just was one of those. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about his public comments and his frustration. I can understand working as hard as you do in a dojo with Shibata, that if you are not reaping those benefits, you could be a little bit salty. It could also be all a gimmick. It could all just be a game he's playing, and in 2 months he's in Bullet Club, and here we go, that kind of thing.
Isn't that the funny thing, by the way, when you look at Young Lions and you realize, some of these guys are going to be heels? Because
I've always thought he was going to be a heel. Like Frederick always struck me as a heel.
As Young Lions, they're always so underdog, vanilla and underdog, to the point that it's kind of like the what in the old territory days they call it, the old white meat baby face, like signing autographs for the kids and chanting USA and things. And they don't do that, but they're such good guys, and they're always paired up with either Chaos or Huntai. And it's just funny to think like some of these guys are going to be assholes someday. Yeah. and maybe that's what Carl is setting up, that he's going to go heel. And again, huge respect to Carl Fredericks for getting through that program. This isn't me saying he's untalented, but I do feel like he had been surpassed by his classmates. And maybe a heel run is exactly what he needs, because that's brought some people out of their shell in a lot of ways.
When I say X Factor, I mean exactly that. I don't know what it is. He has all the tools.
Yeah.
Something is just missing in the recipe, and he's not cooking. That's it. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he knows what it is. Maybe it's a gimmick change. Maybe it's a personality change. But whatever it is right now, it ain't clicking, and I hope he figures it out.
Yeah, and very few words are said around New Japan that don't mean something. So if he's kind of sounding a little heelish or a little mad at the company, mad at the world, maybe it is a heel turn where they can just see, well, let's see what he does on that side of the locker room, and maybe that's the piece that's missing. Maybe he just needs to be a little smart aleck, or maybe the smarmy heel type, and maybe that'll be a better fit for him.
100%. I hope so, because I am not the type of person that wants to see anybody fail in pro wrestling. Not for the work that somebody does.
Not after all that, yeah.
But I want to see it right. I want to see it go right for him.
Yeah. Well, now the thing is, we've been talking about whether he should be booed or cheered. How's that for a transition, huh?
Hey.
We're getting cheering and booing back, kind of, and later. So it was good news and bad news. So let's just spill it out there. The news is that people will be allowed to cheer and boo. It's being done in a very conservative way. It is not going to happen during the G1, which broke my heart. I was really hoping we were going to get it back for G1, or at least the finals. Come on, give us that at Budokan. No, it's going to happen at shows in early September, so 2 months from now, in Korakuen Hall, in a socially distanced setting, where they're only going to sell about 700 seats and will have a designated cheering section. So not even all of those 700. I'm curious to see how this is going to go, because the people that are going to be in that section it's going to be so weird being the only section of this place that's cheering while everybody else is sitting there clapping and stomping like usual. This is so bushy road as far as the conservatives. There's no proof. There's no evidence right now that cheering and booing spreads this any more than anything else does. And I will not get into politics on this show. That's not where I'm going with this. But man, this just seems like, guys, if you can do it at baseball, if you can do it at these, let's go. Let these people cheer. I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy? Are you tired of waiting too?
I'm fine that they have been cautious. I am ready for it to come back, but I'm with you. Like, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I definitely feel like, yeah, I'd be ready to go if they decided they were ready to go.
Yeah.
I think they're just being cautious. We have very little idea what the government is demanding of the big events and how they want to present, and it's, yeah, I'm ready, but I'm not gonna fight it if they're like, yeah, we're not ready. I'm like, all right, okay, all right.
Yeah, and it's a thing where, this is where being owned by a big conglomerate actually is kind of working against what we want as fans. There's no question that the fans want to cheer and boo, that you can, at certain points when a big angle happens or a big moment happens, you can hear them like start and then kind of stop themselves, like they're fighting the urge. And of course, Jay White was just flat out egging it on at the recent show there, which was funny, but at Dominion. But they want to badly. They're hoping to badly. And what I mean by Bushy Road kind of working against us in this is, if this were still just Inoki's company and it wasn't part of this big conglomerate, I don't think they could afford to do this. They would say, well, we can't have these crowds as low as they are. We've got to let people do what they want to do, or they're not going to come. Bushy Road has the money to just kind of say, well, we can wait. We can wait. We'll sell T-shirts. We'll, sell some NFTs. We have the video. We have the app game. We have all these different revenue streams. As far as ticket sales go, we can hold off. We can be conservative about this. And it's interesting, like a company that doesn't have that. I think that they would probably allow the booing and cheering just to hope that it would up attendance, because not every New Japan show does all that well. A couple of those shows this week were in the 500s in attendance.
See, I got a question about this. They have a New Japan Pro Wrestling Music Festival coming in August. Are they not going to be cheering at this New Japan? So
and also, if Taichi isn't headlining, I'm not going.
Hey, if Taichi doesn't show, we riot, right?
That's right. This is what we've been waiting for.
This is a music festival.
He's such a great singer, does not even have to move his mouth when he does it.
I mean, all he just needs is put a microphone to his mouth and the rest is magic. It's somewhat interesting that we're talking about an event in which, again, I don't know how a live outdoor music festival people are going to be behaving, but I guess they're just imagining it being a different type of crowd and atmosphere, being outside and booing and cheering is fine. But those were the two things. Those like, well, this is already a New Japan event, and they might be cheering there. So, and I was like a ... Can we finish this like thought?
Yeah.
But it just must be an indoor precautionary thing with cases rising and falling, I mean, they had to pull Hiromu because of the fever. So I think this is just an abundance of caution. Hiromu had a fever before Forbidden Door. That's why we had the banger 6-man instead of an 8-man. But yeah,
that wasn't necessarily COVID related. It's just that he was not allowed on the plane because he
so just the abundance of caution seems like a factor to me that I feel is probably the overarching factor. And if things go well, and there isn't a huge rise in cases after this, maybe by the time we get to Wrestle Kingdom, you got like the lower bowl can cheer and then the upper bowl can't, or whatever. I don't know. Whatever their rules for interaction are, I hope that it gets looser, not tighter going into the future.
Very well said. All right. Well, before we go on to those Korakuen Hall shows that we were mentioning there, and by the way, the one on the weekend did have good attendance. We'll talk about that. It's not a total loss on that. Wanted to mention the Fight Game Media site and Patreon. There is too much stuff as far as pro wrestling, boxing, MMA out there for any one human being to watch. That's why fightgamemedia.com and the Fight Game Media Patreon is so important. Jeremy, there are shows, articles, podcasts that cover all of it. It's great to listen to as you're driving around or while you're working. and it can keep you up on all the stuff that's simply impossible to watch. We have an embarrassment of riches as far as the wrestling, MMA, and boxing that's out there right now. But FightGameMedia.com and the Patreon, which is only $5 a month, and you get a ton of exclusive shows. $5, that's it.
$5.
It's cheaper than the Starbucks I got earlier today, and it covers everything, doesn't it? And there are shows not just about those combat sports. You might know something a little about that, and go ahead and tell folks about that, and just what a great resource that Fight Game Media can be for you.
You know, they have an Impact podcast. They have a Joshi podcast. We got Pound for Pound with Robert Silva, who features his 45 greatest boxers of all time at the end of every episode that we also upload to YouTube. We have Mel and Sam at the Power Bombshells. They are here far more consistently than we are. We do the 2-week turn. They're back every week, and they're pumping out long podcasts in which they are giving thoughtful analysis to the shows that no one else is talking about, and credit to them. You got the head leader, Garrett Gonzalez. He's got his flagship shows, the Fight Game podcast, that you can actually find free on Spotify through the Wrestling Observer newsletter. You also have the Raw flashback from 1997, I believe, in which him and John LaRocca have a podcast. You got the John LaRocca podcast, Take It Home, where this guy, Booker from APW, he's coming back to out of retirement to talk about the shows that he watches and how he feels that they're working, how they're not working. You've got the AEW shows, the Boom and the Dynamite show. They're both recapping AEW from a reactionary and a weekly analysis, which you'll find between Wednesday and Monday. A lot changes in AEW, and the conversation can be pretty interesting when you divert from those. And then we are sometimes contributors to the Wrap, which is a WWE all-encompassing show that covers everything that you need to know about WWE, NXT, SmackDown, Raw. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath when you think about the shows that we're watching on WWE. But Keel Cash and Scott Young, they do great work. They are making people laugh left and right. And our humor is not for everybody, but their humor is for everybody. And I will go to my grave on that one. But did I miss anything?
No, I mean, there's just so much on there. Besides, I know you have a show on there about various parts of pop culture. It's just great stuff. It's $5 a month, and there's a lot of free stuff that goes on both on Spotify, on YouTube. So check it out.
So you can find us at Fight Game Media on YouTube. You can find us at Patreon, Fight Game Media. Basically, look for Fight Game Media. You see the headphones at the bottom of the screen right there. That's our logo. That's us, and we will entertain you.
There you go. So let's move on to these actual wrestling shows. We've been talking about all these issues. We had 3 shows to deal with, and I really enjoyed these. For a lot of times these Road 2 shows can be a succession of multi-person tags, and we saw an awful lot of that. But I thought it was presented pretty well. I thought we had some good stuff. 1,200 people came on Sunday.
Wow, and that's big.
It was a big event, and it was for the return of in-ring return of both Kenta and Kushida, and that was in the main event, and it drew. It did well. Now the other 2 shows on Monday and Tuesday were in the 500s, a little less, but it was on a weeknight, and it did not have the novelty of the Kushida and Kenta returns. But I enjoyed these 3 shows. They told a little bit of a story about things that are coming up, and especially regarding the junior heavyweight title, the never open weight 6-man titles, and of course keeping people strong going into G1. That was one thing. When you look at these lineups, you knew anyone in the G1 wasn't going to be losing too often. I think there was one job done by someone in the G1 tournament. So, Jeremy, what did you think of these shows?
I felt like they were a shot in the arm, breath of fresh air. I don't know what got into the roster going into this, but there was an energy that I haven't quite felt from these shows in a while. A couple of matches on that first night that stood out to me were the 6-man with Sanada, Shingo, and Naito versus Clark Connor, the DKC, and Yuji Nagata. Court Connors has so much confidence right now from his last couple weeks that he was the one that was just standing tall. You could see the progression between him and the DKC, right, and look at Court Connors and see like that was you 2 years ago. Yeah. And the DKC isn't impressing me much now, but I'm hopeful in the future. That was the kind of takeaway that I got from that one. But the match of the weekend for me was the Alex Zane, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kushida match versus Gedo, Kenta, and Taiji Ishimori. Mm-hmm. There was a lot to this match that you hear those 6 names, right? And you think, what, where, why these guys? Okay, so Alex Zane is upset with Bullet Club because they took his friend Ace Austin away from him and joined Bullet Club. Hiroshi Tanahashi and Kenta, Kenta's last match was when Hiroshi Tanahashi took him out in that brutal no holds barred whatever street fight match at Wrestle Kingdom, and then Kushida has returned for the first time and he's challenging Taiji Ishimori. So you see this disparate group of people, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, this match makes complete sense. This is fantastic. And then they go out there and they tore the house down. It was a party match, like the way that you hear some other promotions have a match. And Hiroshi Tanahashi didn't have to do anything because Alex Zane and Kushida did all the heavy lifting in that match.
They were very busy.
They just let him do a couple of things, and everybody looked great. It was the kind of match that you're like, if this is what we have to look forward to in the next couple months of New Japan, sign me up. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Alex Zane continues to blend right in with that New Japan style now, and he also has a lot of confidence. You can see that growing. It wasn't there at the beginning of Best of the Super Juniors. By the end of it, it absolutely was. And he definitely was here. I mean, he did not look out of place. He looked excited as hell, but he did not look out of place at all in that main event. He main evented that show. I mean, he was in the main with Tanahashi, Kushida, and the group from Bullet Club, Kenta, Ishimori, and Gedo, and wrestled like he belonged in it. And that was a big one. He went 2-1. He was in multi-person tag matches with either Hantai members or Chaos. Lost the second night, won again the third night. And in every match, he just looked like he was fitting in and learning the style and enjoying it. I mean, he looks like he's having a lot of fun working in front of that Japanese crowd, which is taking to him. I agree with you, by the way, on the DKC. Still has a way to go. I think some of the karate chops look kind of silly in Japan. It just, and I think the crowd took it as being kind of silly. And so
there was a Spike Dudley vibe about him.
Yeah, it's
like just junior member, like, calm down there, son.
It's not quite there, but you're also right about Connors. Just his confidence is through the roof right now. Should be. He's really wrestling well. He also had a confrontation with Desperado in the interview area, which is going to lead to a New Japan Strong match. So there was some nice little business done there, where one thing leads to another in New Japan, and again, that's going to end up being a pretty good match right there. Connors has proven that he can work with those guys and work on their level. So looking forward to seeing more of that. There was just a lot to like in these 3 shows.
There were 2 matches that I will jump back to after I ask. I totally lost my train of thought. I'm just going to go back to the 2 matches. So the 10-man tag on the second night really set some groundwork for the G1. It was the Los Ingobernables de Japón, Bushi, Takahashi, Sanada, Shingo, and Naito defeated Wado, Taguchi, Okada, Ishii, and Zane. And it was a great match. Went 15 minutes, sub-main event. But right after the match, Sanada and Ishii just started staring daggers at each other. And they're in the same bracket with each other. Going into next month, and there was no other moment going into this entire G1 that got me as excited as these 2 dudes looking at each other like, I don't like you, I don't like you either, and I can't wait. And then I looked on the G1 bracket. Guess who faces each other at the final night of their bracket? Sanada and Ishii underneath Tama Tonga and Jay White.
Sanada has been working very hard, and what I mean by that is he also did a thing with Taichi on the third night, where they confronted each other, and they are going to be facing off as well. And Taichi did a very interesting promo in the backstage comments that they have those up like the next day after the show. They'll have them subtitled and things. And Taichi said it goes back to their All Japan lineage, and they've been. He said we've trained together, we've eaten dinner together, we've carried bags together, and he says I'm really looking forward to showing him that I've progressed further than he has. Just a nice piece of work there. So they're starting to put those little Easter eggs in, knowing that all this stuff is coming up, and only, well, geez, we're only about 9 days away from the first day of G1. So it's
real
coming
close.
up quick. Yeah. Kushida, I thought he looked like he belonged again. I mean, he seemed definitely to be breaking away from the WWE style of wrestling, going back to that New Japan Junior Heavyweight style. I thought he picked that back up again fairly quickly. I was a little surprised he tapped in night 2. Yeah, he lost that match and did and tapped out. But again, there's a little bit of a history in New Japan of people coming back after a long time and taking a little while to get on the big winning streak again. He won again. He was on the winning side again on night 3. So he and Ishimori are still circling each other. Ishimori trying to dismiss him as a possible challenger. He's been gone. He's not that good. I'm too good for him type of stuff. And that's gonna build. Obviously, it's gonna build toward a match. That's the only way that's ever gonna go.
But they haven't announced it. And are we presuming it's going to be the finals of the G1 night? Probably.
I would imagine so, and they'll probably be involved in some of the tags, during the shows. Although we don't know that for specifically, but yeah, I mean that was what they said after he tapped out Kushida. His comments backstage were, just doesn't deserve a title shot. The next night, after Kushida was on the winning end, Ishimori was a little more pissed off and just thinking, maybe I just need to get this guy in the ring and end his delusions of being on my level type of promo right there that worked. So
the other moment was the last night of the 3. The last 2 matches kind of overlapped into each other, and they were both they were both a lot of fun. And when I tell you Stephen Conway, that I had a blast watching Toru Yano defeat Dig Togo in a dog cage match, and I tell you I had a lot of fun with it. I'm not lying at all that match was exactly what I wanted it to be. And I was doubly impressed by the fact that it then crept right into the next match, in which the House of Torture lost the never open weight 6-man tag team titles to Chaos, Goto, Yo, and Yoshihashi. And it was just like, this is nice. Send the crowd home happy.
Yeah, they definitely did that. And Yano and Togo were a part of that as well. So not only did one match bleed into the other, but the semifinal never really ended as it turned out. Let's explain all this. So they have the dog cage match. So this was a match where they have the big dog cage out there, just the one that you like put your animal in when you're going out for the night and you don't want them running around the house. Had one of those at ringside. Think like
a King of Pro Wrestling stipulation, but not a King of Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, you throw your opponent in the cage, lock the cage, you win. They had done this actually with Minoru Suzuki, so I'm much happier that it's Dick Togo that's doing this with Yano and it was kept short. It was 7 minutes and 20 seconds.
Get in, get out.
Yes, and I did like the finish where Yano actually gave him a catapult and he just somersaulted very neatly into that thing. You can tell he'd been working on that spot. Did it perfectly, won the match, but there had been interference from the House of Torture, Evil, Takahashi, and Show out there during it. And then the challengers, the rest of Yano's buddies from Chaos, came out to beat up them and fight with them around ringside, which allowed Yano to get Togo one-on-one and for the babyface to get that clean shot and win.
Just fantastic stuff.
Good wrestling storytelling. The fun part was, what was it? I guess it was Yo and Show, or was it Yo and Yujiro? Either way, it was Yo was in the ring fighting with somebody, and he just signaled for Red Shoes, who was wandering out there for the main event. Our main event referee, he just said, "Well, we're all here. Just ring the damn bell." And Red Shoes looked around, and my favorite part of this, Red Shoes counting the 6 guys. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they're all here. Go ahead. And just had him ring the bell. And the crowd kind of popped for that. They enjoyed it. And then a pretty decent 6-man broke out. And it involved Yano and Togo. And various people went in and out of that dog cage, building the tension there. And in the end, not only were the Chaos team successful in winning back the titles, although it's a different version of the team, but Chaos has the titles back. But Evil, Yujiro, and Togo ended up locked in the cage after the match. They pinned Show, and then
utterly beaten, utterly broken.
Yes. And my favorite thing in those comments, Jeremy, this cracked me up. Yo handled it because Yo got the final pin, I guess, and he's on the microphone, and he invited the fans to come and take a picture with the House of Torture in the dog cage before leaving the arena that night.
Pure joy.
And I hope people did. They posed next to him, like with the belts. They walked over there. There's Togo, Evil, and Yujiro just this staring death daggers at him, just annoyed as all hell as they're posing with their newly won belts next to him. And he invited the crowd to do the same. I would like to see that. If people did that, I hope it happened.
It was a silly match. I don't want to see it all the time, but on the energy of this show, it was a perfect palate cleanser for everything else that was going on. I didn't need to see another Ishimori Kushida main event tag. That was the right series of matches to close the 3-day run on, and it was great. I had a great time.
What'd you think of Kenta?
I honestly, he fit right back in. Like there was no he's amazing. There was no he came back too early. I think he was in that baseline where it's like if you're not great and you're not bad and you're just there and you're hanging with everybody else, you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I mean, he actually was banged up pretty bad after that match with Tanahashi at the Wrestle Kingdom show. So seeing him back and at full strength was that he had this thing that he was doing on his promos where he is insisted that everyone should apologize to him, and he would beat on people and say, apologize for what you did. And I don't know where that one's going particularly, or if that's just an affectation you decided to do, but that
He's got weird respect issues.
There you go. Maybe it's something like that. Also, interesting note, Ishimori noted that it was the first time that he and Kenta had teamed in 13 years.
I saw the photo from their old days, and they didn't look anything. Kenta, I could see it, but Ishimori is way different.
If you go back to young Kenta and current Ishimori, that's some of the best abs in the history of wrestling.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
No, I'm serious. Like Kenta used to be
I believe you.
shredded, and Ishimori, of course. I mean, everyone identified him by his abs when he walked out. He had the mask, the Bone Soldier mask on, and they're like, "Oh, this is supposed to be a big reveal." And he had the open jacket. He said, "Well, that's Ishimori. He's the only guy that looks like that."
Speaking of segues and tag teams, we should talk about another tag team tournament that's going on over on Strong. Right. There's a lot going on in Strong right now. We should probably just tackle it from the get-go.
Okay.
Last week on Strong was the United Empire show. We had all United Empire matches going through for an hour and 15 minutes. The opening, and when I tell you this match, you're going to want to go back and watch it yourself. It was United Empire with Aussie Open, Aaron Henare, and Great O'Khan, and they beat the Mighty Don't Kneel with Jonah, Shane Hayes, Mikey Nichols, and Bad Dude Tito.
Ooh, okay.
This was a match.
Now you're talking.
They were not messing around when it came to this show. I believe Aaron Henare got the win and defeated Tito, and it was just one of those, hey, this is going to be a very interesting show for the 4th of July weekend. So we got there, and then Willie Mack made his debut for New Japan Strong, and he was defeated by Jeff Cobb. Now, the last time these guys wrestled each other, and they didn't mention where, but they mentioned when, was in Lucha Underground. So that is a blast from the past. They are both way different wrestlers than they are, but they had a match that was 10, 50 times better than the one they ever had years ago. These are both veterans, and they know exactly how to wrestle each other. And then in the main event, we had Will Ospreay defeat Homicide with Eddie Kingston at ringside. And I don't think I need to tell you that Will Ospreay won this match.
No, certainly.
I don't. But I should tell you that Homicide had a fantastic match, and it has been continuing to set up some Blackpool Combat Club versus United Empire issues. And I am super excited to tell you about them. That is something, as a recap, everything about that show. I don't want to tell you about the matches because they're worth watching and just enjoying the joy to yourself.
Okay.
It was a great match, and that leads into the preview that they gave us for the New Japan Strong tournament coming up.
Yeah, so this is straighten me out on this. They are establishing tag team titles that are strong, certain like the strong title that Fred Rosser just won from Filthy Tom. Now they're going to have a strong specific tag team title, correct? And do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
They are the New Japan Strong tag team champions.
Okay.
The main matches are happening. The finals are happening in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I believe some of the other matches have already happened at Ignition, according to the map that they have here. But here are the brackets. Christopher Daniels and Yuya Uemura are going to face the Factory of Eric Solo and Nick Komoroto. That is going to be on this Saturday's show.
That's an interesting team, Solo and Komoroto. That's the an odd couple team there. This could be interesting.
I mean, I feel like you could read between the lines of who's moving forward there when you have one New Japan Strong and one AEW versus two AEW guys.
Yeah.
Maybe you can move forward in that. Who knows?
Yeah.
I would bet on that, but I have not looked at the results of this yet, and if I was wrong, I also wouldn't be surprised. So on Saturday's show, there's another match with the Mighty Don't Kneel, Shane Haste and Mikey Nichols. They're going to face the West Coast Wrecking Crew, Jor-El Nelson and Royce Isaacs from Team Filthy. So that's going to be on that side. And then Midnight Heat is going to be facing Stray Dog Army on the other side, with them potentially meeting the winner of Dark Order and Aussie Open in the semifinals.
Now I saw that maybe this is a bit of a giveaway then, but I saw that one member of the Dark Order was Alan Angels.
Yes.
Okay. So he's no longer in AEW, so that'll probably tell us a little bit about how that one went, although I don't know. I haven't looked, but I just, if I'm putting down money.
If I had to bet between the Dark Order and Aussie Open, I'm gonna lean with Aussie Open.
Fair enough.
That's my thing. I think it'd probably be Stray Dog Army and Aussie Open versus the West Coast Wrecking.
Okay.
Yeah, Aussie Open versus West Coast Wrecking Crew feels like. But maybe they go back to the Mighty Don't Kneel and they just keep going with the feud between those two groups, because they just had a match this past week and they were setting up the build in the show. And because United Empire won that match, it's entirely possible that the Mighty Don't Kneel move forward to the whole thing.
They have a babyface as the singles champion now after a long run with Lawler. So I would lean a little bit more toward a heel winning the tag team titles. So that just for me, my guess would be Aussie Open in the end. That's just where I would go with that. Plus, I just like Aussie Open, to be fair.
They're incredibly talented.
That might be me just wanting to see more Aussie Open matches.
So there's another very interesting thing that I found out today, and that is Royce Isaacs, who I just mentioned, and Bad Dude Tito are going to Japan.
Okay.
They are going to be the partners for Filthy Tom and Jonah in their tag matches on their off nights of the G1. So they got the invite to do tag matches, so on and so on and so forth. So there were windows and opportunities for some of this other talent to go over there and participate in Japan for this, which I thought was really interesting.
It is. It also tells you a little bit about who New Japan has an eye on as far as coming off of Strong and perhaps moving on to the main New Japan roster someday, or at least planting the seeds for something like that. Clark Connors is, of course, heading right back, but he's a presence in Japan now. So's Ace Austin. Appearing on G1 cards, I mean, that's an honor. It's got to be a sign. that the people at New Japan have looked at Strong and just think those are some of the guys that we might want to introduce our fans to on a regular basis. That's some high praise. That's good for their careers for sure.
It's really cool to see, and I feel like New Japan is putting their money where their mouth is by already pivoting some of these strong talents to come to G1, especially after the talk that they gave about what their future plans are. So for me, the most exciting thing about this press conference was them telling us that New Japan 2.1, because they said that New Japan 2.0 was 2012, that New Japan 2.1 is going to start at the G1. And so there's no messing around. There's got 2 weeks, week and a half, and whatever New Japan is going to be, whether it's a spit shine refurbish over the glass paneling, or if it's a deeper clean and all the nuts and bolts of the operation, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's exciting to take in and know and see that they're going somewhere with it.
It also makes for a stark contrast, I think, with what WWE does with NXT, which is allegedly developmental, but it seems like anytime someone gets quote unquote called up to either Raw or SmackDown, they're given a bad gimmick or jobbed out, or it just never seems to really amount to a whole heck of a lot. Whereas if you're a free agent looking to sign someplace, well, if you go over to New Japan Strong, there is now a track record of them actually moving people up when they excel. It does appear like you have a bit more of a shot with that than it does over with the other guys. I know that people have different goals and are looking at different things, but it's funny considering how both NXT 2.0 and New Japan Strong are considered kind of a developmental version of a bigger thing, and just how New Japan is operating it as opposed to the way WWE is, which treats it like, that, well, there's some throwaway characters for the most part, not a whole lot of traction granted, but on Strong, the people end up in the G1, best of the Super Juniors. It does seem like there's a different approach to those.
Merit-based pipeline in pro wrestling. How about that?
There are a couple. I mean, Rhea Ripley's done well. Bianca Belair is doing fantastic. It's not a blanket thing, but it's
but there's generally a sense that if you are getting developed for a higher spot on the card, they should be training you to be successful once you get there, not teach you one skill set that is completely irrelevant to what you need to do when you get where you need to go. That's not prepping people for success. And I am happy to be following something consistently that I don't have to have that concern constantly.
Fair enough. All right.
You got a history lesson.
I do.
I have been told that you are going to talk to me about the GHC title and someone holding it.
Yeah, and it's a way that things kind of weave together in Japanese wrestling. And we mentioned that right now New Japan is on a run where they are working with more different promotions than, really, since some of these, like the NWA territories, all work together. And even then, they didn't work together that great sometimes. But right now, New Japan seems to be getting along with almost everybody. Not AAA, by God, but that's more of a CMLL thing than anything else. But and they're working with CMLL in Mexico. They're working with AEW/ROH in North America. They work with Rev Pro in England. They're even working with other Japanese companies. And I don't mean just Stardom. Yuji Nagata, for instance, is going to be on an All Japan show at Korakuen Hall later this month. And if you noticed on those shows, Satoshi Kojima was wearing a new championship belt. Well, it's not a new championship belt. It's a new championship for him. It's the old GHC title. Now, that is the Noah title. It's their top championship. And there is kind of a little twisted history as far as New Japan and Noah goes. And it involves some of our favorite guys. So let's go into that a little bit. So Noah was created after Giant Baba passed away. There was some internal conflict in All Japan. His widow was running the company, and Mitsuharu Misawa, the top star of All Japan, disagreed with Mrs. Baba about the direction of the company and decided to form his own. And he got with the TV network that carried All Japan, and they agreed to go with him because he was the on-camera star, and he formed Noah, and he brought almost the entire All Japan roster over with him. So All Japan was left with a fairly bare cupboard. It was pretty much Toshiaki Kawada and a couple other guys, and not a whole lot more. So they held a tournament to determine the first GHC champion. Now that stands for the Global Honored Crown, the GHC title. And so Misawa was the first champion. He defeated Yoshihiro Takayama in the finals, and that was back in April of 2001. He defeated Jun Akiyama in the semifinals, and Takayama defeated Vader in the other semifinal by DQ. So you had Jun Akiyama, Vader, Mitsuharu Misawa, Takayama, a lot of Hall of Famers involved in that tournament, and pretty much immediately this was considered a major title in Japan. Didn't have to do a whole lot of work. It had one of the great workers of all time in Misawa holding it, a lot of very good wrestlers contending for it. On it went. However, after some of those guys aged out, and think people like Misawa, people like Akiyama and Kobashi and things, there were some little tough times for Noah up ahead. They didn't do the best job of creating brand new stars to follow up. And it's a common occurrence in wrestling. And so they went into a little downslide. So in 2015, they actually were kind of teetering business-wise, and they entered into a working agreement with New Japan. Gato was still booking New Japan back then. He's one of the longer tenured bookers you're ever going to see. And he put his friend, tag team partner, Jado, on the book for Noah. So Jado began booking Noah while Gato was booking New Japan.
Okay.
And what happened was, in 2015, they sent Suzuki-gun over from New Japan to help out and to work there. So Suzuki-gun went over to Noah, left New Japan altogether, and Suzuki ended up winning the GHC title from Naomi Marufuchi. So Suzuki was actually the first New Japan guy to win the GHC championship. So he won it from Marufuchi on March 15, 2015. Now I say that even though he left New Japan, he just wasn't on New Japan shows. But at this point, we're all working together here. So in storyline, Suzuki-gun left. But like I said, we're all working together here. So he won the title from Marufuchi and then lost it back on December 23rd of 2015. They stayed as the top heel faction, Suzuki-gun did, until the relationship ended in December of 2016. That led to Suzuki-gun returning at New Year's Dash on January 5th, 2017, assaulting Okada right after the day after the Tokyo Dome show. And that was the last that New Japan and Noah worked together until very, very recently. Whatever happened there, neither side's ever really said. But apparently the split was acrimonious. They just didn't
wasn't going to work. They weren't interested, whatever it was.
Whatever, yeah. So Noah and New Japan did not cross paths again until November of 2021 when they announced that third night of Wrestle Kingdom to benefit the Japanese Red Cross. And that was what we saw this past year. It's the first time Noah and New Japan had worked together in any kind of way, really, since that split when Jado and Gato were booking both companies. So we had Suzuki win the GHC title back then. And then just recently, on June 12th, Satoshi Kojima went over to a Noah show and defeated Go Shiozaki on June 12th for that GHC title. So he becomes the second New Japan wrestler to hold that GHC title. Now, that's all fine, but to show how interwoven this is, I bet I got something that you didn't know. Did you realize that in a roundabout way, Satoshi Kojima is the founder of Suzuki-gun?
Tell me why.
Okay. Kojima was the original leader of the group. It was called Kojima-gun, and it was founded in December of 2010. The original members were Taichi, who had just come back from his excursion in CMLL. He came out as a surprise second to Kojima when he defended the title at a show against Shinsuke Nakamura. All of a sudden, there was Taichi back from Mexico. There was a man named Nosawa Rongai, boy, R-O-N-G-A-I, Rongai, Nosawa Rongai, pardon me, and Taka Michinoku. They were the originals. So believe it or not, MVP, who's now in WWE, joined in February of 2011. That was the original Kojima-gun group. Nosawa brought MVP in storyline. He was just signed by the company, but Nosawa brought him in storyline. Interesting little fact here. They didn't cross paths, though, because before MVP debuted, Nosawa was arrested for stealing a taxi cab. Must have been quite an evening out in Roppongi. So, Nosawa's out of the group and MVP is in the group.
I wanted to make a Roppongi fight joke, but that's not going to work.
No, yeah. So, anyway, so Kojima has the IWGP title at that point. And so then, after losing that title to Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom 5, Kojima ended up getting into a tangle with Togi Makabe, and then after wrestling Duntaku that year, Taka Michinoku and Taichi, the members of Kojima-gun, turned on Kojima. And after that match with Makabe, Kojima was starting to make a comeback on the two members of his group that had just turned on him when suddenly Minoru Suzuki comes out, clamps on the sleeper hold, and Suzuki had just returned to New Japan not all that long before that, and they announced that Taichi Taka Michinoku had kicked Kojima out, similar to how Edge was just kicked out of Judgment Day. And instead of Finn Balor coming in, it was now Suzuki, and they were no longer Kojima-gun, they were Suzuki-gun. And it wasn't until later that month that Lance Archer joined up. So that is
pro wrestling is great.
There you go. So the two men from New Japan who have held the Noah Championship are Minoru Suzuki and Satoshi Kojima. Both of those two are woven together in the creation of the faction we know and love now as Suzuki-gun. So that whole relationship and storyline, in effect, has a 12-year history going all the way back to 2010 and continues on now, where the GHC title is back on New Japan Wrestler. And he'll be wrestling against Keno later this month in a title match for that GHC title. We'll see how long Kojima holds it.
I thought it was... I was surprised when he was announced as X on the match. Mm-hmm. And I guess I was more surprised because he had the title with him and it wasn't a New Japan title. So this is really like topical to go in and set up the context as to who, what, where, why, when on that belt, and why Satoshi Kojima was walking in with the belt most people might not be familiar with. Yeah, so thank you for that. All right, so let's go through some last minute. Have you changed any of your opinions about what you think the G1 is going to be like, or any tea leaves after the New Japan Road that feel like you're pivoting or more excitement? Just tell me what you're thinking about the G1.
You know, I can't say that anything has radically changed. The main thing for me is that the second Jay White retained the title at Forbidden Door, I knew he wasn't going to win it because there's no point in the champion winning the G1. It's all about creating a challenger. And it immediately installed Kazuchika Okada as the odds-on favorite to win the thing. Because, again, going into a Wrestle Kingdom without Okada in the main event feels funny to me. They just don't like to do that very often. You like to have him as either the champion or the challenger. So it's still... Okada, I feel, is definitely coming out of the A block. That was the one I feel the most confident in. I also feel like, just looking at the line, because remember, the first day, they usually have big matchups. The last day of the block matches, the matches matter. They almost always have a match where it's two people that might get in the next round. I guess it's semifinals now. It used to be just finals. And I think they're going to tease the idea of Jonah coming out of that block. I think Jonah's going to do really well in this tournament, and probably should. I mean, he's a talented as hell guy. You just don't know how. That's the monster block, right? All the big men are in that block. I feel like Jonah is probably going to come out of it in pretty good shape. So I still feel good about that. I still like my pick of Tama Tonga upsetting Jay White on the last day, which allows either Ishii or Sonata through out of the B block. I'm still going with that. So when it comes to the A and the B blocks there, Jeremy, before we move on, what are your thoughts? Do you agree, or do you have a different idea how this pans out?
I'm going back and forth on Okada. So he doesn't need to win the G1. He should win his block. But I think that there is enough time and enough narrative path that if you wanted to set up some type of path to Wrestle Kingdom that had to make a bigger obstacle for Okada to get through, I would have him lose after he wins his block, so that he is potentially one of the other options. Because, winning the G1 isn't always just the fast path to the title, and then you're going to win the title and you're going to call it a day. They've gone back and forth on this a couple of times. Sometimes the winner is on night 1, sometimes the winner is on night 2. Ever since they've done the 2-night Wrestle Kingdom, so it's not like a lock it in and call it kind of thing. I think you're right on Jay White. I think he he's going to have a bad night with Tama Tonga. I feel like that's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. But I think about the Okada booking when he was the champion at New Japan Cup, and them installing 2 potential challengers to him with the way that they structured the tournament. So to me, Jay White may lose the block and then have a match with Tama Tonga for the title later on.
Right.
Or they could just have a grudge match and he wins the block because they want to keep their champion strong. Either way, he will still be the champion come Wrestle Kingdom. So it really almost doesn't matter. But it does matter in the sense of who elevates as a result of Jay White being de-escalated. Would it be Tama Tonga, or would you lean towards Sonata? Because I kind of want to rule out Ishii for a number of reasons. I just, if Okada's already going to be in there, I think that having another Chaos member on the B block just feels unwise.
Okay,
you're going to have representative of every major stable coming out of this. You know what I mean?
And here's what you can do with Ishii also, is that you can have a situation where it's not only Wrestle Kingdom you're setting up, but almost every title match until Wrestle Kingdom, because the champion usually defends against people that beat him in the block. And yes, that could be Tama Tonga. He could also take maybe a second loss or a draw to Ishii. Maybe Tama Tonga holds him to 30 minutes and he doesn't get that 2 points he needs. But Ishii might be able to beat him in the block and have it give Tama Tonga that opening, perhaps. And then you get Jay White and Ishii later on in the year, or it could be having Ishii and Sonata in that block. One of those two, I think, is going to beat Jay and be a title match, a good title match on the way to Kingdom. So there's a lot of options there. There's a lot of places they could go, and all of them end up giving us some pretty good matches.
So I was just looking at the last night at Budokan Call of the regular blocks, and now that we've kind of established the A block and the B block, you got the C block, and the 2 main matches there are Hiroki Goto versus Evil and Tetsuya Naito versus Zack Sabre Jr. And then you have the D block, which is Shingo Takagi versus El Phantasmo and Will Ospreay versus Juice Robinson. Those are the 4 matches that have been pinged by a number of people as the ones to watch going into that last night. I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours.
For the C block, it is wide open. I'm really puzzled by who comes out of C block because, Zach, Naito, that makes either one of those two makes sense. And they feel good with Naito in big matches, but they've also shown with the booking of the New Japan Cup and his run through G1 that they feel pretty good about Zach as well. So it's not open and shut. I think that could be either one of those two. For the D block, I continue to think it's going to be Shingo. And here's why. That last night matchup with Will Ospreay and Juice Robinson. Will is the U.S. champion. I can absolutely see them setting up a U.S. title match by having Juice cheat in some way. He's Bullet Club, so it doesn't have to be a clean win, but it could be something where he steals one from Will on the last day, thus getting a U.S. title match and allowing Shingo to go through. It's going to come down to Will or Shingo, and I can see that being the direction they go. It would give him that grudge title match and also allow a little bit of an out for Ospreay, especially if it's a screw job. And then you can always kind of come back with Will in another match at Kingdom. That was kind of where I lean. So I think Shingo coming out of D. C block, flip a coin between Zack and Naito. It seems like every time I look at the block, I make a different decision.
I see everything that you said, and I see the pathway to it. I see it a little differently, and here's what I think. I'm going to go back to the figurehead of every stable, and I still think it's Naito in LIJ, so I think he's going to end up coming out of that block. I also think it's going to be Will Ospreay. I feel like he can lose the US title in the referee disputed finish that they always do, or even if they do a Bullet Club heel versus heel match, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm looking at this, and I almost think that the 2 nights of Wrestle Kingdom based off of these brackets would be, and you could flip a coin on this, Okada versus Ospreay and Okada versus Jay White.
Okay.
I think Ospreay may end up winning the whole thing, but because there are 2 nights, Okada, like I said earlier, has to have his own journey to get to night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom, and night 2 will be Will Ospreay versus the winner of Okada versus Jay White. But if you had a big time Okada qualifying for Wrestle Kingdom match at the Stardom New Japan Super Show in November, there's your main event.
That's an interesting point. My only counter to that one is they did Will versus Okada in the first night of Kingdom last year, so I don't know if they're going to go right back to that. But they might. I mean, it was a great match.
They've done Will and Okada. It's one of their marquee matches that they love to do every 18 months.
I'll watch it every day and twice on Sunday. I don't have any problem with it. But yeah, that's the only thing. There's just something telling me that it's Shingo's year. But
I feel like after last year's G1, where he didn't even feel like he was the champion, like he had a very strong showing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away, but it didn't feel like he was Shingo the man in that G1. He took a back seat to other people that they were focusing on. And like Shingo's got nothing to prove to me. And if he were to win the whole thing, I'd be over the moon. But I also kind of think that he doesn't need to be champion, and putting him at the top of the promotion right now might actually hinder its development.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, I still think Okada's the odds-on favorite just because they just feel good about having Okada in the main event, and they can guarantee it with that. So that's still where I'm leaning on as to who wins the overall thing, with Shingo being my second favorite. That's just how I have it. We'll see how it plays out.
I was going into this G1 thinking, you know what, Okada, this is the Okada year. We're just, the Okada best hits, where he's gonna just cruise on through the year and just, have the greatest hits, the 50th anniversary. They didn't do that. They are putting the chase onto Okada. But if they were to belt Okada for one night and then he lost to Ospreay the next night, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, and Will's going to win a G1 some year too. I'm convinced of that.
Yes,
So it's one of the good things about this tournament. We probably aren't going to see the number of great matches because of the way the tournament is structured, but we're going to see a lot of good matches. Maybe not as many as past years, but we're going to see a lot of good ones. And I think this is going to tell a pretty interesting story. And Gato usually does a good job of that. And just the variety of great matches we could have for Kingdom. It should be an interesting journey to watch. I'm really looking forward to G1 this year, even though it's a different format that's probably going to lead to fewer of those all-time classics.
I'm definitely optimistic about the show. I've talked to a bunch of people, even Dave Meltzer, just like, I'm a little disappointed on this. I'm like, yeah, shit happens, whatever. This is how it's gonna be, and we're gonna have a great time.
I bet Dave still enjoys it. I bet Dave
when the tournament happens, we're all gonna be talking about what banger matches these are, and like the level of competition and the work rate, all the stuff. We're gonna be having evergreen conversation about this all over again.
Except for you, Jerome, bless his heart. But we'll have Peter, and that'll help.
Consistency is key. Consistency is key.
Exactly. All right.
What are your socials, Conway?
My socials. I'm Stephen Conway 88 on Twitter, and then I also am a contributor to FightGameMedia.com. You can look for my work on New Japan and WWE there. I also have my own history website, RingsideReplay.com. Go check that out as well. Jeremy, yours.
You can find me at Jer Firestone on Twitter. Sometimes you'll see work that I do pop up on the internet, but just follow me on Jer Firestone on Twitter. That's pretty much the most interesting place for my silly little discourse on life. Conway, are we ready to go?
I think so. And 2 weeks from this show here, we'll be back, and we will be just beginning the G1 Climax 32 tournament. We're going to have so much fun talking about that. I hope you join us in 2 weeks. Back for Speaking of Strong Style. For Jeremy Feinstone, I'm Stephen Conway. Thank you once again for spending your time with us. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Stephen, I can't wait to find out who was right all along. We'll see you later.